Okay, hi everyone. As mentioned, I am Reana Mallory. So, I have 15 minutes with you. So I'm just looking at the clock right now to make sure that I stay on time. So, for my 15 minutes, I did want to tell you a little bit about me and about my writing process because I think sometimes as authors and as readers, that's always something that has always interested me is what is our writing process and how do we come up with the story ideas? How do we come up with the characters and the world and ideas, right? Especially when we're writing those super steamy themes. So as it says here, I am a USA Today bestselling author. I actually made USA Today in a box set with all interracial romance authors. So we were all women of color. We were all Black women who crafted stories within a box set that was only focused on interracial romance. And we were only the second box set to actually do that on the USA Today and all of its history. So I don't think anyone has done it after us, but that's always something that I'm very proud of is making USA Today in that manner. But I've been writing since 2009. Avid reader, as many of us are, we're avid readers. We get lost in the world of our story and kind of, we get transported into this other world. And so my first book was published in 2009 and it was a little novelette, right? The whole little novelette, novella, novel, but it was a little novelette and it was all about military romance. And uh, I sat at my kitchen, at my kitchen table, because I had ran out of books to read, and I sat at my kitchen table and I wrote To Love a Marine and give or take around, I want to say 3 weeks, but it was a little novelette, and I had no idea what I. So since then, I have published 55 or so books. Some of them are very short. My Lunchtime Chronicles book, which is, I have two of my Lunchtime Chronicles for parts of the prizes for today. Those are very short, steamy, less than an hour reads that is all about sex and food and quick connections, intellect, all of those nice things where you can just read it over lunch. It's a lunchtime read. So those are some of my short and steamy books, all the way up to my full length novels. I actually have one here that I'm going to put up. You may not be able to see it. It's called Alpha's Rise. Maybe I'll take off the background. Hold on a second. Because I'm in the hotel. I'm trying not to. Um, I'm trying to see that. Oh, there we go. It's not too bad based on where I'm sitting. So Alpha's Rise is actually a polyamory book. So it's about wood shifters, and in order to be part of the Alpha Triad, which is in a made up world that came out of my brain, in a made up world that no one else knows about. In order to be part of the Alpha Triad, there has to be story. You are the Alpha. It is Alpha Supreme. It is the Queen, and it is their second, their third. And so that was actually the second triad book that I had written, but everyone really loved this one, not only because of the weird sister element, but because of the polyamorous element as well. So I love that story. But Alpha's Rise is actually one of my favorite books. I love all my books. I love all my books, but Alpha's Rise is actually one of my favorite ones because of the supernatural, paranormal element that came with the book. So as I mentioned, I wanted to talk a little bit about my writing process and how I craft a story, how I think of all of the elements of a story and how it all pulls together. So for me, I can think of stories from any. I actually, one of my fan favorite books came from a song. It came from a country song by the name of Austin. And that book is Weekend Fling. And it is about two people who meet in a country bar and they spend this amazing weekend together. And he happens to be a Navy SEAL, and then he has to go off on a mission, but he doesn't, turns out. there's a surprise from their weekend together, and then she goes to find him, he's gone. But there is this voicemail message that is waiting, and she calls, and it's like he, just in case she was to reach out, he had left a personalized message for her. So the song often actually um, prompted the idea of the story for Weekend. I was driving in my car one day and the song came on. And if any of you know the song Austin, I want to say it's by Blake Shelton, but if any of you know that song Austin, then you'll know the premise behind it. And so from that one song, I came up with an entire scenario of the story. So I can come up with a premise of a story from anything that I'm doing, whether it's watching a television show, I'm driving down the street, I'm people watching. I love to people watch. And so when I people watch, I create scenarios in my head of what is their story? What do I think they're doing? What is the conversation that they're having? And from that one spark, then grows an entire story or series. So one of my other more popular series is the Heaven on Earth book, which is all about the military men. And so the story for the first story in Heaven on Earth came from a situation involving domestic violence that I was aware of. And that situation actually prompted me to create this romance story, this erotic romance story where this woman gains her power, her sense of self-worth, her sexuality, and she finds her heaven on earth. And so from all of that one series, there is now a series that has been built. And so that's kind of where my ideas come from. The Lunchtime Chronicles that I mentioned, where again, two of the books here are here as prizes included in the prize pack, that came about because at one time in a former life, I worked at a law firm, and there was always this thought of, at a law firm, if you're the secretary or if you're a paralegal or whatever, that, oh my gosh, this amazing, sexy, hot attorney is going to see you. They're going to want to rip your clothes off, and they're going to want to fall in love with you, and they're going to whisk you away into this amazing life where they're rich and you're pampered and all of these things, happen to you because this super smart, rich attorney fell in love with the office secretary or the legal secretary. And so the Lunchtime Chronicles series, you know, came from there. And so that's where, even though there are currently 5 stories in the Lunchtime Chronicles series from my perspective, it's a multi-author series. All of those stories are connected from that one story. So all of the characters leave and they connect and they're friends and they're in their same universe and world. And so for me, I always think that's important for my stories as well. And so that one idea can talk so much more. Um, but when you think about the sections that we often write, I'm just going to be honest. I got my section a lot from either watching porn, which I know is now, can't even find it. It was funny. My husband and I were talking about it the other day because we live in Virginia, and I know there are probably other states that are doing this, but in Virginia, you can no longer go onto the internet and go to Pornhub or RedTube or all of those different porn or whatever the one. Pornhub was my favorite. So you can no longer go onto Pornhub and go and get some inspiration. But I would go onto Pornhub. They even took it off of Tumblr, where you can no longer see porn. But that's where I would get inspiration as far as like the positions and how they interacted and some of the sexual movements. So I would get inspiration from there to just put those elements in my story. And my husband, who I fondly refer to as the Italian, he'll tell you as well. Some of the sex scenes come from us. so, so as I'm sitting there and I'm thinking about how are how are these two characters going to interact and how are they gonna, have sex is hot and steamy and it's like you're drenched and mind blowing and your whole, out of body experience. Or if you're standing up in the kitchen and pressed up against the wall and your partner is down on their knees in front of you, making sure they take you to heaven, like a lot of that either came from watching porn or me and my husband. And so, and so it's something that is a part of our life. It's something that even whether I'm writing sci-fi, whether I'm writing paranormal, whether I'm writing contemporary, sex is sex. Whether a person has one penis or they have two penises, or maybe they got one penis and they got eight tentacles. I don't know. But whatever it is, like there's certain elements of that that always come into play when you're trying to be intimate, you're having sex. I don't want to curse too much, but when you're just like going at it hard and heavy, and so all of those elements are things that I bring into the story. Now, of course, the stories, it's the love and then it's the connection and it's the drama and it's the angst and all of that is still there. But I don't write stories that are for the faint of heart. My stories are going to have hardcore sex. My stories are going to have those elements where people are getting a little antsy reading my story. I want them to. I want them to feel as if they are in that moment with me. And so whether it's how a story can start off so innocent. Like I said, I'm driving down the street and I hear the song often about someone leaving their partner and then leaving a voicemail. It can seem so innocent, but how you weave the elements of that story in and you bring in the tension, sex, the sexual tension, angst, the fighting, whether you do bring in BDSM elements or, real sister elements or paranormal elements, whatever it is. You start with an idea and then you weave in all of those other things that actually try and pull the reader in. And so one thing, I'm just looking at the time here. So one thing that I've always wanted to try with my stories, and I haven't yet, is uh, I do want to try an alien with tentacles story. I have not yet done that, but it is something that I am super interested in because I like to read them. I like to read those stories because something they can be very sexy. They can be very erotic. They can really kind of get you in the mood depending on how many tentacles they have and how many orifices they go into. Right? So I've always wanted to try a tentacle sex alien story and see if I can weave in some of that. Of course, you have the erotic nature of the story, but also, what is the balance of bringing in those human emotions and human elements that grab a reader and bring them in so that they never want to put the book down. So my process, I actually write fairly fast. Like I can sit at home and I usually write in my office or I have another spot that I write. I can sit down and map out generally what I want the characters to be or their general theme. And I free flow, right? So I write by the seat of the pants. So I don't do outlines. I don't do any of that. I have an idea of where I think the story should go. And then I sit down and I allow the characters to tell me what, what they want me to say. And there have been times where I have tried to steer the characters in the direction that I wanted them to go. I'm like, I don't like where you're taking the story. I think the story should go in this direction. And so I'm going to force it. And as many of you know, our characters will stop talking to us. And so my characters stopped talking to me. And that story sat for 6 months because I felt I knew what was best for the story. But the characters were telling me they wanted me to go in a different direction. And so it was a battle of will. Like it was like a battle between me and my characters. But ultimately I just had to let go. I had to let it go. And so I ultimately went in the direction that they felt was best. And then the story, I finished the story. And I don't know if that's a product of, or I don't know if it happens with those who plot. Again, I don't plot, but because I don't have this preconceived notion of where the book is going to go, and I'm allowing the characters to tell me, I'm finding out where the story is headed as I'm typing. And so that can be a very nerve-wracking process because you don't really know how's the story going to end. I don't know how the story's going to end. I don't know what the character conflict is going to be. The characters haven't told me yet. So I think for me, as I wrap up, I think the important part for me when I write my story and how it all comes together, my writing process is I have learned over the years that no matter what type of story I write, no matter if it's romance, erotic, hard erotic, dark mafia, whatever it may be, that I cannot, for me personally, I can't prescribe where the story is going to go. It truly is up to the characters to tell me the direction that they want me, to take their characters and their stories. And if I'm not listening, my characters will stop talking to me. And so I have learned over the years to allow that free flow, right by the seat of my pants process to just play itself out, no matter what type of story I'm writing. And so I think for me, that works best. And it's, you don't always get what you thought you were going to get at the end of the story. But I would probably say 8 times out of 10, I get at the end, I'm like, okay, I somehow, I knew that was the right, way it was going to end, and others surprised. The Alpha Triad, I had no idea that they were going to be a triad until I wrote the first book in the series, which was Odin's Honor. And as I was writing Odin's Honor, uh, the story came to me that Tobias, who was going to be the lead in the next story, that his parents were part of an Alpha Triad, and that was how they became the strongest wolf shifter leadership within the code. And in order for Tobias to ascend to the throne, he needed to be in a triad as well. And so I didn't know that was going to happen until Tobias told me that was going to be his story. So it's very interesting. So, all of us, if you're authors in here or if you're readers as well, but, authors all have their own unique style of bringing a story to life, no matter what that story is. But for me, I think, sex scenes are kind of difficult for me. And so that's why I love watching Pornhub or whatever. I can't always necessarily bring in my personal perspective into the sex scenes, but Pornhub was my spot, right? It was a place that I would go to. Um, so now I have to think of something else. I have to think of other ways to find those sex scenes. So my imagination is good, but there's only so many ways to really think about putting, you know, slot A into slot C. so, I'll leave it there. Again, I just want to be mindful of time, but I don't know if there's any questions or anything.
You can keep going. You're fine as long as you
Oh,
need. There's no one after you until 4:10. Well, so just like you do another 5-10 minutes, you're good.
oh, got it. Oh, good. Okay, yeah, I was looking, and I know it's an hour behind, so I'm always like trying to figure out the
Just
right
do
time
your
too.
thing. Take your time.
Yeah, yeah, perfect, perfect. Oh, and I see some people putting in some suggestions for me. So egg hamster. So there's the thing. Now, because I live in Virginia, I need to check and see if egg hamster is still an option for me. Because our governor, um, I guess they passed some law that you can't get to. Well, that thought you can, but you have to put in your ID. You have to either let them scan your face or upload a picture of your ID. And I don't know if I want some company knowing what kind of porn I'm looking at. Like back in the day, you could kind of sneak in and you could look at all the things that you wanted to look at, and no one would know. You could have like a private account, or you could just whatever, and you could go in and you could look at all the porn you wanted, and no one had a clue. But now, like, they want your ID, and I'm like, I'm not gonna give you my ID. You're not gonna scan my face. So I have to figure that out. But the writing process as a whole, it is. I love writing. It's such a passion of mine. I love getting lost in a world, whether I'm reading a book or I'm writing a book, but I love getting lost in that process and letting the characters form their own personalities and their own way of thinking and talking. Because then it's just fun seeing them kind of come into this whole person. No, they're not real. And some of the positions that I put my characters in, I still don't know if they're actually possible or not. But I'm at home and it's funny. I'll be at home and I'll say, babe, come here. Like put your leg here and then like put my arm here and then like twist my body and just to see if it'll work. And sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it doesn't. And he's like, what is really? And I'm like, I'm writing a sex scene. Leave me alone. Just do it. Um, so I try and, model it out so that it's at least somewhat realistic when I'm trying to
Do you ever graph it out like
when
on
I'm
paper?
trying.
I love that you do that though, because we do that.
We
I
do
that.
too.
Yeah.
Yes. And I got so stuck on this one, and
Okay.
Marty sent me that link, and it helped me because I could not like get my head around what I needed to do.
See, I need that. Okay, is there a link, Marty? Did you put a link in the
Yeah, he
chat or
put the
something
link
that
in
I
there,
can
and
get
Texas
to?
has the block too,
Oh,
and
perfect.
it didn't work. I mean, it worked here in Texas, but
Oh, it did. Okay. Okay, got it. Yeah. So I do that a lot. Like, I'm like, okay, babe, I'm writing this text scene. And like, what does it feel like when you come? Like, what does it feel like? Explain that to me. Like, does it truly start in your toes? Do you feel the tingle in your toes? Or do you feel it in your back? Like, something like, explain it. And he's looking at me like, what the fuck are you talking to explain this right. And so yeah, it's so he'll try. Like honestly, he will try and explain it to me and say, okay, well, it starts here, then my toes curl, and then it's like something like is your nerves are crackling, and I'm like, okay, so like, and I'm writing it down so I can try and transfer it into the story. But just that whole process, I think it's fun. Like they're stressful when you're writing stories, or maybe they're not as fun or angsty and all that good stuff. But I think for me, it's that bringing everything together, right? Sex for me is a way to communicate, and so when I put sex in my book, that is a way for the characters to truly communicate and come together and express their love, their feelings, their anger. Like angry sex is one of those things. That I find so fun to write because it's the angry sex where you're like, and then you're like pounding away and they kick you against the wall and they got throat on your hand on your throat. And it's like it's just like it's so intense and it's so deep and it's like all in that, when you're reading it, it's fast paced, it's going, it's going, it's going, it's going, and then you're all done, and then everything kind of slows down, right? It slows down once you're done. And so I love writing that, but here's the thing, I don't like angry sex personally. Like I can't do angry sex. Like, or if I'm mad at my husband or something, I can't do angry sex. I'll tell him, like he's like, no, let's make up. And I'm like, no, if you come near me, I'm gonna juke you in the throat. I'm not done being mad at you. You're not about to have sex with me. Like I don't do angry sex. Like I'm mad. Like you need to you need to stay away from me. Put it in my book. Like I love it in my book, but like me personally, man, I will like crack you upside. But like, don't do that. Don't come winging your thing in my face, talking about, let's get that. No, we're not doing that. So, but but it's all part of my writing process and bringing the characters together. And if I'm angry or something, then man, I can write a badass alpha bullshitter, like, oh man, like
do
I
you
can
write
bring
your
it
best stuff
all to
angry?
bear. I do. I
I do
do,
too. I
because
feel
that's
like
when
I
I
do
bring
too.
yeah, that's when I bring out the alpha a-hole, the alpha asshole is when I'm angry. And so if I know I'm gonna write a guy who's just a total asshole, I do it when I'm angry because then it's like no fucks given. I don't care. You're like he's killing 5 people, I don't care. And then he's gonna go home and he's gonna fuck his woman with blood all over his body. I don't care what you want me to say. It's just how it works
Have you
out.
ever
So
started a fight just to be able to finish a scene? To get angry? Because
not
I mean, I've done that.
I've done that.
I've done that a
Although
few
that's not a
times.
bad idea.
I've done it a
That's
few
not a bad
times. Like,
idea.
no shame.
I have not, but that's not a bad idea at all.
What is the
At
weirdest
all.
thing you've ever like graphed out position wise?
Well, okay. So, well, it was actually with this book, without the bride, because there were three people involved, and the men, the swords don't touch, just because it just didn't. And so I had to graph out how she was on she was on the bed, and her one leg was here, and one of them, Tobias, was like in between her legs. But then I had to try and get it so that Nathan, they they turned, because Nathan was gonna go in anally, and so I had to do it so they didn't disconnect. For me, it was a challenge because I'm not in a triad relationship, and so I had to do it so that they didn't lose the motion, like they were the motion and all of that, but they turned, and Nathan was able to just slide right, I slide in, but he was able to go in. Because going in anally is not easy, as we all know. So, but that, I think, for me was the hardest one, because I had to get the Italian involved to say, okay, when is it, how do I keep you from switching out? Like when I'm doing this. And so we had to do a little leg motion and figure it out. But
Yeah.
that was probably the hardest for me, only because there were three people involved.
Yeah, the one I had like 5. I'm like, there's just too much cock. I don't know what to do with all this stuff. Like, I didn't know what to do. And
Yeah.
that's when he sent me the website. Like, sometimes it pays to have guy friends that you can ask these stupid ass questions to.
Yes, yes, yes. I'm gonna have a look at that site.
Sometimes I look at the things I ask, I'm
Yeah.
like, I really need help. Like, I don't know what's wrong with me.
Part of it is also like when we're writing a story, sometimes you need I'm gonna say this word wrong, but you need the and not fantasy, but the fantastical. Is that a word? Is that a word?
Sure, it
It's like
is.
it, we're gonna make it a word today.
If
It's a
it's not,
little
it
bit of the
is.
threat. Right. Oh, it is. Okay. It's like a stretch of the imagination, right? Where it is a book. So it's not always based in reality, because let's be real, not every man is 9 inches long. They're just not. But in our books, they are.
I don't
In
know
our
that I
books,
want that
they're
though.
like,
I feel like that might hurt.
you know what? Have you ever? Okay, so there's this thing. Not that this is part of the writing process, because I look at a lot of stuff. But there is this lady on TikTok, and she's
I know what you're
measuring
talking
out, like,
about.
you know what
Yes, it's
I'm like?
hilarious because it gives you a reality check. You're like, yeah, that stuff isn't going down my throat. It's not going down. It's like it's gonna like kill me. There's no
Have you
when
guys
she
ever
goes from
noticed
like
though?
normal sizes and then keeps going up and up, and it's like, yeah, okay, I don't know what we're thinking here, but sure.
Yeah, sure, that's not gonna happen. 9 inches for every man is simply not realistic. 7 inches is almost too much, right? And that's kind of where
Yeah.
and when you measure it out, and so there is a bit of that fantastical thought, or as a writing, because again, it's aliens, it's wolf shifters, which don't freaking exist. Okay, so are you gonna, like, men don't not when they come, right? They
Right.
don't, but in a sister book they might, because
Yeah.
it's a little bit of, it's fantasy. It's, so there is a bit of that goes along with it, but I think for me,
Thank you
part of
for
it is,
that.
the fun.
Your last little bit, I feel validated.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with average.
No, no.
In fact, it might
It's
be better.
perfect. It might be better, right? Rather than, because at eight,
Well,
nine
and
inches,
the
yeah, man,
reality
you're
is what you
hurting.
think is average is probably could actually be above average because of like,
Exactly.
our screwed
Exactly.
leg. Yeah.
Exactly. We don't really know what it, we have, different measurements. So, um, But the writing, for me, as I've been talking about the writing process, I find it fun. I think it that
Marty. Oh
inflation
my
and
God.
everything is sad, Marty. But it's true though. So there's a little bit of, how far do you? I mean, I think I read some books where the guy was like 11, 12 inches, and I'm like, okay, okay, enough. Like that's just
Well, I mean, you have to
stop.
realize too that all of these men are generally 6'5", 200. Like they're rarely under 6'5". So
Yes,
I mean, you kind of got to give them the girth to match the height. So
but
Jeez,
it's
keep laying it on.
it's like
it's just
soda can, circumference, a
right. Yeah,
size of a
because
soda
yeah,
can, and it's
yeah,
12
Oh,
inches.
Marty.
It's like, fine.
yeah.
So,
Uh-huh.
oh, that's
I think I'm
funny.
gonna go ahead
It's,
and close the recording, but we can keep talking because this is funny.